A true story from Georgia. You have served your purpose. The land remembers. Hey everyone. I hope this story reaches those who need to hear it most. Sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful ones. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Let's support each other in the discussion below. They told me I had served my purpose. I showed them what purpose really means. Margaret, honestly, you have served your purpose here. At this stage, you are just creating stress for everyone. I was arranging fresh daisies in a mason jar when my daughter-in-law spoke those words. Her tone was practiced, deliberate, like she had been rehearsing this speech in her bathroom mirror for weeks. My son David stood behind her, studying the hardwood floor we had installed together 3 summers ago. His posture reminded me of when he was 12 and broke the neighbor's window with a baseball. Back then, his shame was mixed with fear. Now it was relief, like a heavy burden was about to roll off his shoulders. She continued without pause. The senior community in Savannah offers 3 meals daily and weekly housekeeping services. The environment is cleaner than what we can provide here. And at least there's someone will monitor you around the clock. You need to be somewhere you can fade away peacefully without disrupting our household routine. I paused, pressing my fingertips against the cool glass vase, willing my hands to remain steady. My name is Margaret. I am 73 years old. I spent 4 decades teaching high school English literature. I organized bake sales for the drama department, led the parent-teacher organization, and pressed my husband's work shirts until diabetes took him from me in the autumn of 2003. I liquidated the only property I had ever owned to help my son and his wife construct their dream home. A sprawling ranch-style house near Augusta, with cathedral ceilings and a covered patio. I believed I would be welcomed there. I believed I was investing in a place where multiple generations could thrive and create memories together. I was mistaken. I maintained my composure as I placed the vase on the counter and closed the cabinet door. When do you plan to relocate me? What do you mean? My daughter-in-law seemed surprised by my measured response. When will you be taking me to Savannah? I asked quietly. She appeared caught off guard by my calmness. Next week, we have already completed the paperwork. They are preparing a room for you. I nodded once. No protests, no pleading, no tears. Just a single nod from a woman who had finally understood the fine print of the life she had written for others. That evening, I gathered my belongings. There was not much to collect. Several cardigans, a photograph of my late husband Harold, my engagement ring, which no longer fit my arthritic fingers, but remained in a satin jewelry box, my prayer book and the property documents, the weathered manila folder containing the land records I had never discarded. I placed it carefully at the bottom of my travel bag. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the zipper. Not from fear, from remembrance. I recalled the first time I held my son during his bout with pneumonia. I remembered staying awake all night, sewing his graduation robe when the school's order was delayed. I remembered covering his college textbook expenses when his part-time job fell short. I remembered everything he seemed to have erased from his memory. The following morning, they loaded my suitcase into their vehicle. My granddaughter was absent for soccer camp. My grandson barely glanced up from his tablet. I suppose they were not informed of the true circumstances. Perhaps it was simpler to say grandmother needed assistance rather than grandmother had become inconvenient. We traveled in silence for most of the journey. My son kept his attention on the highway. His wife scrolled through social media. I gazed out the passenger window. The sky stretched wide and pale. The rolling hills in the distance were dotted with late summer wildflowers. It was August, humid, achingly familiar. When we arrived at the facility, it exceeded my expectations in appearance. Glass entrance doors, pleasant receptionist, a fireplace in the common area with seating arranged, as if someone still believed in meaningful conversation. We will check on you when our schedule permits, my son said. Avoiding eye contact, I nodded again. That was all I could offer him now, silent acknowledgement. The intake coordinator was gentle. She inquired about medical allergies, prescriptions, dietary restrictions. She asked if I preferred a television in my room. I declined. I already had enough voices filling my thoughts. They departed before the lunch service. No embraces. No warmth. Just the soft whisper of the automatic entrance closing behind them. The sound of something irreversible. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in my assigned room. It smelled of disinfectant and artificial vanilla. There was a window overlooking the parking lot, a small desk, a bookshelf already stocked with novels I would never open. I surveyed the space and attempted to feel grateful. It was sanitary, it was secure, but it was not home. That afternoon, I requested the wireless internet information from the nursing staff and contacted my attorney. His name was Bernard. He was 87 years old and still mentally sharper than men half his age. "Margaret," he said warmly. "Good heavens, it has been too long. What brings you to my attention?" "My children just deposited me at a senior facility," I explained calmly. He hesitated. "Are you seeking legal action?" "No," I replied steadily. "I want to remind them who holds the property title." Silence on the other end of the line. "You never transferred ownership?" he asked carefully. "Number they never requested it. They were too occupied selecting paint colors for a house they did not legally own." Bernard chuckled softly. "Well, you always were a strategic thinker." "I want the documentation filed," I said clearly. "No theatrics, just legal notification. And when the timing is appropriate, I want to serve them a reminder. Not through litigation, just in writing. With my signature at the bottom, I will handle this matter personally," he assured me. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. In a stranger's room, surrounded by strangers, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was regaining control of something they believed I had lost. My voice before I became a burden. I was everything. I taught high school English literature for 37 years. I was the educator who remained after hours with students needing extra support and arrived early for those whose parents dropped them off prematurely. I baked banana bread for every faculty meeting and purchased classroom supplies with my own salary when the district budget was insufficient. I knew every student by name, even those who only passed through my classroom for a single semester. They still send me holiday cards, some with children of their own now. My husband Harold was a gentle man with calloused hands and a compassionate heart. He died of complications from diabetes 4 years after we both retired. We had plans, simple ones, nothing extravagant. A driving trip to the Great Smoky Mountains, a vegetable garden behind our cottage in Blue Ridge. But illness does not respect calendars. It arrives like a thief in the darkness and leaves you with empty chairs and unused vacation brochures. After he passed, I remained in the house for several months, the one with yellow shutters and a front porch glider. I maintained it immaculately, as if he might return and take pride in its condition. But the silence became overwhelming. I went entire days without hearing my own voice spoken aloud. So I decided perhaps it was time to be closer to family. My son David had recently announced he and his wife were expecting their third child. They owned land, nothing constructed yet. Just acreage and dreams. The economy was struggling, and mortgages were difficult to secure. So when I mentioned I wanted to sell my property and contribute, they looked at me like I had offered them salvation. I sold the cottage. Every square inch of it contained memories. I watched the moving truck drive away with the last of my husband's photography equipment, and the recliner where I used to read bedtime stories to my grandchildren. It was painful, but I convinced myself it was for something greater. For family, for a future that still included me. I transferred the money, nearly every dollar I had remaining after settling medical bills and funeral expenses. I told them, use this for the house. I do not require much. Just a small space in the back. Somewhere I can enjoy my morning coffee and kiss my grandbabies goodnight. They called me generous, selfless. You rescued us, they said, and I believed them. The house was completed quickly. Beige siding, spacious kitchen, laminate flooring, and a fireplace controlled by a remote. They selected every detail. I just smiled and said it looked wonderful. Initially, everything felt right. I occupied a modest guest room while they finished the lower level. My grandson would climb into my bed with picture books. My granddaughter would assist me making cookies, sneaking chocolate chips when she thought I was not watching. I prepared dinner several nights weekly, helped with laundry, ran errands. Nothing major, just helpful. I wanted to be helpful, but time changes people, and helpfulness has an expiration date. As the house settled into routine, so did the roles. I began hearing comments I had never heard before. "Mom, could you not reorganize the spice rack? I know you mean well, but it makes it hard to locate things. Maybe ease up on the discipline, okay? They are just children. They do not need your old-fashioned rules. I appreciate that you are always available. But sometimes we need space, you understand. So I occupied less space. I stopped volunteering to babysit. I only joined meals when invited. I waited to be addressed. When they wanted to convert the basement into a family room, I offered to move into the sun porch. It gets good light, I said. I enjoy it there. No one objected. By the second year, I stopped feeling like a member of the household. I felt more like a fixture, like furniture no one wanted to discard, but no longer used. And still, I remained quiet because I loved them, because I remembered rocking my son to sleep, because I believed, somewhere deep inside, they still saw me as more than a leftover. But I was wrong. I gave them my home, my savings, my hands, and my time. I gave them my name on the property deed, and gradually, they gave me silence. Initially, they provided me the guest room upstairs. It had a large window overlooking the garden and a handmade quilt I had sewn when David was still in college. They called it my sanctuary, said I could decorate however I preferred. I hung a portrait of Harold near the reading lamp. I arranged my classic novels on the shelf. I made it feel like home, or at least the closest approximation to it. But circumstances change. It began subtly. One day, they mentioned they were hosting relatives for the weekend and asked if I could temporarily sleep downstairs in the basement. Just briefly, the guest room had a superior mattress, they explained, and they wanted to make a positive impression. I did not protest. I packed my nightgown and relocated to the unfinished space below. Concrete floor. A fold-out sofa that squeaked. No windows, no clock. Just a table lamp with a dying bulb and an odor that reminded me of damp towels. The weekend passed, but I never returned upstairs. They never mentioned it. Never invited me back to my room. The relatives departed. And that was that. My space became their spare space, and mine became forgotten. Meals changed as well. In the early months, I dined with them, set the table, passed the cornbread, listened to my grandson describe playground adventures, and my granddaughter practice spelling words with confidence. But gradually, I was asked to eat earlier. Or later, we are implementing a new family schedule, my daughter-in-law explained. It is nothing personal, just more manageable with the children. I nodded. From then on, I ate in the kitchen while they used the dining room. A paper plate, a lonely corner. My portion carefully measured and left in the microwave, covered with plastic wrap like a leftover. One evening, my granddaughter peeked in and asked, "Grandmother, why do you not eat with us anymore?" Before I could respond, her mother called from the hallway, "Sweetheart, Grandmother likes watching her programs during dinner. She prefers it that way." I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it. What would I say? That I missed being part of the conversation, that the silence around my dinner plate grew heavier with each bite. So I smiled, took another bite, nodded, and continued chewing. I became invisible. I cleaned the kitchen when no one requested it. I folded laundry before it even made it to the hamper. I raked leaves in autumn and swept the patio when the wind scattered debris across the welcome mat. I thought perhaps if I remained useful, they would remember. But usefulness is not the same as belonging. One afternoon, I walked past the dining room and heard laughter. My daughter, in-law, her sister, and several friends had gathered for coffee. I was heading to the laundry room, carrying a basket of damp towels, when I caught part of their conversation. "So what is it like living with your mother?" "In-law full-time," one of the women asked, playfully teasing. My daughter, in-law, laughed. "Honestly, it is like having a housemate who does not pay rent and reorganizes your pantry. She is sweet, but, let us be realistic. She is basically a live-in guest we cannot charge." The others giggled. It was meant to be humorous. I understand it was intended to be light-hearted, but it struck like a slap. A live-in guest, that is all I was. Not family, not a mother, not a grandmother. A guest, without payment, without space, without grounds to complain. I stood there for another moment, holding the basket, the towel on top still warm from the dryer. Then I returned to the basement, and folded every piece with care. That night, I sat on the edge of the fold-out sofa and examined the room. The cement walls, the low ceiling, the single light. My life had contracted to this. An unfinished basement, a microwave dinner, and the echo of my name used like an obligation. I remembered something Harold once told me. Years ago, when the school administration tried to force me into early retirement. "You can let them make you smaller," he said, "or you can remind them you built the foundation they are standing on." I had built this. Not just the house, but the people inside it, the child I had raised, the family I had supported, the foundation they walked on every day. I had given everything. And still, I had been made smaller than the smallest guest. But I did not cry. I did not march upstairs or confront them or plead for a seat at the table. I simply turned off the lamp, and in the darkness, I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because something deep inside me, the quietest, strongest part, had just awakened. It happened on a Thursday. I was slicing peaches in the kitchen, my hands moving slowly and steadily, the way they do when your fingers know a task better than your mind does. The knife moved in gentle arcs, the peels falling like ribbons into the bowl. I had promised my granddaughter a peach cobbler. She loved it warm with whipped cream on top. I had just finished the fourth peach when I heard footsteps behind me. It was David and his wife, both of them, together. I turned and smiled. "Cobbler in progress," I said lightly. They did not smile back. "Mom," David said. His voice measured, rehearsed. "Can we have a conversation for a moment?" I set the knife down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, followed them into the living room. The sectional was too large for the room. The fireplace glowed even though it was nearly autumn. Everything smelled like vanilla candles and something else I could not identify. Something tense, cold. They sat down. I remained standing. David cleared his throat. "We have been discussing, and we believe it might be time for you to rest properly." I tilted my head. "Rest," he glanced at his wife. She continued. "The house is becoming crowded, Mom. The children are growing. We need additional space. You know how hectic it gets, and it is just not healthy for anyone right now." I looked between them, their hands folded neatly, their expressions too controlled. So, she continued, "We located a wonderful assisted living facility. It is just outside Savannah, clean, professional staff. We already submitted the application. They have a room prepared." I said nothing. She kept talking. "They serve 3 hot meals daily. They have game nights and Bible study. It is not a nursing home. It is a community. You will have your own space and privacy. Privacy like a stray animal behind a fence." David nodded, as if completing a business transaction. "It is best for everyone, Mom. You deserve care." real care. And we need to be able to breathe again. Breathe. As if my presence had suffocated the air from their lungs. I did not scream, I did not beg. I looked at my son, my only child, and wondered if he remembered the nights I stayed awake when he had nightmares. If he remembered the time I sold my jewelry to buy his class ring. His eyes did not meet mine. When? I asked. Tomorrow, his wife said briskly. They are sending transportation. Transportation, like I was a package being collected. Like this was a delivery service. I see, I said. I walked downstairs to the basement and began to pack. Not much to take. Several sweaters, a framed photograph of Harold. My prayer book, a wool throw I had knitted during the long Georgia winters. I slipped the envelope into the side pocket of my suitcase, tucked beneath a pair of socks. They never asked about the deed. They had assumed it was theirs. The house was theirs. But the land, oh, the land. Still whispered my name in legal ink upstairs. I heard laughter. My granddaughter giggling at a video. My grandson arguing about screen time. No one came downstairs to help me pack. By the time the transportation arrived, I was waiting at the curb. A white van, clean, quiet. The driver stepped out and opened the door. "Are you Margaret?" I nodded. David and his wife stood in the doorway, but did not approach. My son gave a small wave, like I was heading out on vacation. His wife wrapped an arm around his waist and whispered something I could not hear. My grandchildren were not even home. They had practice or homework or nothing at all to say. I stepped into the van. The door closed with a gentle click. The driver pulled away. I did not look back. There was nothing left behind me worth seeing. The ride was long, the trees blurred past, the sky hung low and wide, gray and endless. I folded my hands in my lap and exhaled. I had not cried, I would not cry. Some endings are not loud. They are just final. The senior facility in Savannah was quiet, the kind of quiet that does not comfort. It presses on your chest like a blanket too heavy to move. The meals arrived on schedule. The nurses were kind, or at least trained in the appearance of kindness. There were game nights, as promised, Bible study on Wednesdays. But no one looked you in the eye for too long. Everyone walked with slippers that barely touched the floor, as if trying not to wake a dream we were all trapped in. I spent most of my days by the window, a small chair, a side table. My cup of tea went cold often, but I sipped it anyway. I had brought one suitcase. That was all I needed. In that suitcase was the folder that held the deed. I had kept it all these years, not for power, not for pride, just for record, in case someone ever needed to know where everything began. And now, someone did. I took it out one afternoon when the sky turned that soft, aching blue Georgia does so well. I laid the pages out on the table, smoothed the creases, and read every word. My name, my husband's, the date of purchase, the legal parcel number, the notarized signature, the line that said, owner of record. And there it was. Still me. Not them. Not their LLC. Not their mortgage company. Not their new address label on packages. Me. I had never transferred the title. They had never asked. Too busy picking bathroom fixtures and arguing over closet organization. They thought because they had built something, it meant they owned everything beneath it. But they had built a house on land that was not theirs. And land is power. I picked up the phone and called Bernard. Bernard Phillips had been our family attorney for decades, back when lawyers were paid in casseroles and handshakes. He had retired officially, but I knew better. Men like Bernard did not retire. They waited for justice to wake them back up. "Margaret," he said, his voice still strong despite the static. "Well, I will be blessed. What are you calling from?" "Heaven or county jail, neither," I said. "But I might be the ghost in someone's future if you help me." I explained everything, the sale, the house, the treatment, the exile. And then I said the line I had been rehearsing in my head for weeks. I want to revoke permission. Legally, quietly. No screaming, no scandal, just paperwork. He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was good. You always were 3 steps ahead of the rest of us, he said. I will handle it personally. Within a week, the new paperwork was filed. The notice was written. The envelope was sealed. They would find it in their mailbox soon. Between credit card offers and coupon books, just a simple letter, no venom, just fact, that the land beneath their home no longer welcomed them. And the woman they had cast out, she was still standing. The notice went out on a Tuesday. No signature required, just a stamped envelope with a clear message. 30 days to vacate. Legal, final, binding. It was not written with anger. I chose every word carefully, without venom or threat, just truth. My lawyer sent it via certified mail, and I knew the moment they received it. The phone rang 7 times that afternoon. I did not answer. The 8th time, it stopped mid-ring. Then, silence. Then, screaming. Not in my presence, God no. I was miles away by then, in my own peace. But in theirs. My daughter, in-law, called me names I will not repeat. Words that bounced off me like rain on stone. She called me a traitor, a thief, a manipulator. She called the police. The officer showed up at her door, looked at the paperwork, and called Bernard, my lawyer. He had already prepared a statement. She owns the land, he said, calm and clear. They built the house, yes, but they did it on her property. That gives her every legal right to revoke access. Is she trying to sell the property? The officer asked. No, Bernard replied. She is just removing people who were never granted legal right to occupy it. That was the end of that. I do not know how long they cried, or yelled, or threw things. I was not there, but I heard about the family meeting they held. Neighbors told me the blinds were shut, the voices loud, the tension visible from the sidewalk. It was the kind of chaos you could feel through walls. And me? I was sipping chamomile tea in the common room, watching the wind move through the courtyard garden. No revenge, no gloating, just peace, because for the first time in years, I was not the one trying to hold it all together. I was not the maid, the babysitter, the unpaid guest. I was the owner, and they, those who told me I had served my purpose, who cast me out without a second thought, they were being reminded quietly, legally, irrefutably, that I had never stopped mattering. They gave me silence. I gave them notice. The house stood empty for 3 weeks. When I walked through the front door, the silence was different. It was not the sharp, heavy kind I had once endured. It was clean, open, like the air had been cleared of something toxic. No shouting, no heavy footsteps above my head, no slamming cabinets or whispered complaints, just peace. I did not bring much with me, a few boxes. My books, the same satin pouch that held my wedding ring, and the deed now folded away for good. The house was no longer a place of rejection, it was mine, entirely, quietly. Mine. I started with the kitchen. I scrubbed it top to bottom, wiping away grease, dust, and memory. I donated the decorations, signs that said "Blessed and Gather," to a thrift store downtown. I did not need reminders. I knew what had been lost. I also knew what I was building now, something new. It came to me slowly. First in a dream, then in a letter from a friend at the senior facility. A woman named Patricia had written, "If you ever find yourself alone but not lonely, I would love to visit. I miss tea that does not taste like metal." That letter stayed on my refrigerator. The next one came from Dorothy, then Susan, then from a man named Frank, whose wife had passed 3 winters ago, people who had given all they had to their children, their churches, their communities, and had been left with silence in return. I thought of them as I cleared out the living room. I rearranged the space, not as a family room, but a gathering space. I replaced the sectional sofa with wooden chairs. I brought out the tablecloths I had sewn years ago. I put a kettle on the stove and a vase of fresh-cut sunflowers by the window. I printed a flyer at the library and posted it on the board by the grocery store. Margaret's Place tea, conversation, and time for ourselves. Fridays at 2 p.m. Women 60 plus. Welcome. No RSVP. Just come. The first week, 3 women came. By week 4, there were 13. We sat in a circle, teacups in hand. No agenda, no timer, just stories, grief, laughter, the things we were never allowed to say when we were too busy being useful. They told me I had given them something they forgot how to ask for: space. They started calling me Miss Margaret of the Peach State. I never asked for the title, it just happened. One of the ladies, Dorothy, said it with a smile after she finished reading a poem she had written in secret. Miss Margaret, she said, you did not just open your door, you opened our dignity. The name stuck. Soon, Margaret's Place became more than Fridays. We started reading circles, gardening Saturdays, a covered dish dinner on the last Sunday of every month. The garage became a craft room. The guest bedroom turned into a quiet space with a rocking chair and devotional books. The backyard, once overgrown, was now a small garden with herbs, tomatoes, and a bench beneath a blooming dogwood tree. We planted it together. Every morning, I woke before the sun, stepped outside barefoot, and watered the garden. The soil was soft, rich. Things grew easily here. I smiled at the mint, at the oregano, at the daffodils that kept coming back no matter how cold the winter. I thought of David once, maybe twice a week. Not with bitterness, not with anger, just awareness, like a scar you forget until it aches in the rain. He had chosen silence, but I had chosen something else. A new family, not by blood, but by presence, by mutual respect, by kindness. We were women who had been shoved into corners and closets, who were told, "You have served your purpose," as if that meant we had nothing left to give. And yet, here we were, giving again, not because we had to, but because no one could stop us anymore. I sat on the porch one evening, the sky awash with purples and pinks. Dorothy was knitting beside me. Frank had stopped by to fix the screen door. Patricia was inside, baking her famous pound cake, and I whispered, to no one in particular, "You do not need blood to know who your family is." The wind carried it, and the house, my house, held it. The text came at 6:47 in the morning. I was on the porch, the steam rising from my coffee, the air still holding that crisp bite that tells you autumn is here. But the summer's memory has not faded yet. Birds were just starting their morning chorus, and the dew clung to the rosemary bush I had planted near the steps. My phone buzzed once, just once. I almost did not look, but something made me reach for it. It was from David. "Mom, I am sorry. I was wrong. I was foolish. I see that now. Will you put me back in the will?" No greeting, no warmth, just a plea, half covered in guilt, half soaked in desperation. I read it twice, and then I sat back and watched the sky turn gold. I did not respond immediately. I let the morning pass in its own time. I watered the plants, I tidied the reading room, I sorted some of the new letters from our Friday group. At noon, I finally wrote back, just one line. A debt must be paid before a conversation can begin. I did not send anything more, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because after everything, after the silence, the exile, the insult, the betrayal, I owed myself something more than forgiveness on command. I owed myself clarity. He owed me recognition, not just of my value, but of my endurance, my patience, my silence, my strength, and I was done giving all those things away for free. He never replied. But I imagine he read it more than once, just like I had read his. Maybe someday he will understand. People ask me now if I regret it. Evicting my son, taking back what was mine, turning my old home into a gathering place for women who had nowhere else to be. And I tell them this: I do not regret reclaiming what I built. I do not regret reminding them that the woman they shoved aside was the one who signed the first check, filed the first paper, dreamed the first dream. They said I had lived too long, but they forgot. I am the reason that house did not fall apart long ago. I patched its foundation with retirement savings. I mopped its floors when no one asked. I held its door open to every guest they cared more for than me. I was the quiet architect, the ghost behind the walls, the backbone in the basement. They said I overstayed, but they never noticed how long I stood between that home and the wrecking it deserved. I did not scream when they pushed me out. I did not beg when they turned their backs. I waited. I listened. I remembered. And when it was time, I did not use fire. I used paper. That house may have been filled with their things, but the land knew my name, and the law did too. Now, I live in a place where I am not a guest in my own life. The Golden Haven. It is what we call it now. A small sunlit house tucked between oak trees and open sky. It is quiet, but not lonely. Women come and go. We host poetry nights, potlucks, birthday teas for ladies who no longer get phone calls from their kids, but get hugs from each other here. We mend things together, not just quilts, but hearts, spirits. Every Friday, we open the windows wide and let the light in. We sit in circles. We speak our names. And we tell the truths that were too heavy for our kitchens and living rooms. I do not lead them. I just sit among them, one of them, not louder, just finally heard. Last month, a woman named Evelyn said, "I used to think the worst part of growing old was being invisible. But now I see the worst part was being visible only when they needed something." We all nodded, we knew. But now we are visible for who we are, not what we can do. Sometimes, when I water the herbs in the back garden, I think of David. Not with hate, not with longing, just stillness. I remember him as a child, his small hand holding mine on the first day of school. I remember his face when he rode his first bicycle, when he cried after his father's funeral, when he told me he and his wife were expecting. Those are the pieces I keep, but I do not keep the silence or the betrayal. Those things I buried in the same earth where I now grow lavender and peace lilies. This home, this life, is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet justice, the kind that blooms slowly but never wilts. And if someone ever knocks on my door again, someone looking for kindness, not charity, for connection, not apology, I will let them in, but only if they come with honesty, because I have learned. Kindness is not weakness, it is choice. And now, finally, I choose it for myself. And so, that is the story of a woman they said had served her purpose, of a house built on forgotten sacrifice, of a silence so thick it could have buried her. But she rose, not in anger, not in vengeance, though both would have been justified, but in something far more powerful: clarity. If you have ever been the one who gave and gave until your name was no longer spoken with love, but with inconvenience, if you have ever been pushed to the corner of your own family, if you have ever been told you have served your purpose, when all you wanted was to be remembered, not repaid, then you know. You know what it means to sit in a room you helped pay for and feel like an intruder. You know what it means to hold your tongue when your heart is screaming. You know what it means to watch the people you raised become strangers. But I want you to remember this: you are not invisible. You are not too much. You are not too old to matter. And you are never, ever without power. Revenge does not always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with a deed and a deadline, with a signature, with the quiet click of a door locking behind you for the last time. And what waits on the other side is not bitterness, it is rebirth. Here at her light. These are not tales made for pity. They are not bedtime fables or soft memories dipped in nostalgia. They are truths told aloud, often for the first time, from the quietest woman in the room, the one you overlooked at dinner, the one you rolled your eyes at when she said too much, the one you forgot had a past that roared. Well, now she is speaking, and I promise you, when a grandmother speaks, the world listens. So if you believe in justice that takes its time, if you believe in dignity that does not need an audience, if you believe in memory as a form of power, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to remember the women in your life who have lived through what they never spoke. Click subscribe, turn on the bell, and stay with us here at her light, where silence becomes strength and age becomes armor. Because the past is not gone, it is just finally ready to be heard.